We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast was recorded, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and future. Welcome to the podcast series of Raising the Bar Melbourne, curated by the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences at the University of Melbourne. This special health edition of Raising the Bar, held in May of 2026, featured 20 talks by some of Melbourne's leading healthcare experts and was held across 10 pubs and bars, all in one night. The speakers presented topics ranging from AI and cancer research to understanding ADHD and neurodiversity, helping kids sleep, healthy social media habits, the future of robotic surgery, and much more. In this episode, you'll hear Professor Sean Taylor and Indigenous chef Nornie Bero explore evidence-based, community-driven initiatives that strengthen food systems and support the Closing the Gap commitments.
So, who in the audience knows anybody with diabetes or knows anybody who has complications with diabetes from poorly managed? It does affect a lot of people and families. When I was 18, I saw how diabetes swished through the Torres Strait and destroyed a population. That's what led to my involvement in my health career. And I studied a lot of the stuff around diabetes. But it was always around the poorly managed diabetes that affects people. And we know that diabetes is one of the fastest growing chronic health conditions globally. We also know that more than 500 million people around the world are living with diabetes. In Australia, it affects a lot of people due to the social determinants of health. So we know that. Do you know what well-managed diabetes is the leading cause of? So we're thinking about well-managed diabetes. So if you've got poorly managed diabetes, that leads to cardiovascular disease, amputation, other complications that are associated. But what does well-managed diabetes cause? Nothing. You manage your diabetes quite well, it's the leading cause of nothing.
But it was a trick question.
But as we know, food insecurity is associated with poorer diabetes outcomes and higher hospital admissions. So we know that. And I think that's where food and exercise play the two major things around, reduction of hospitalisation and complications of diabetes. Nornie.
But what we're going to talk about too is what is the difference between when we talk about food security as well? So if you think about yourself, how many meals do you eat? Like if you put your hand up, do you eat 1 meal a day? 2 meals a day? 3 meals a day? Okay, now think about living in community and how you have access to food and how much meals you would eat in a day. So you think about yourself, do you wake up and you have breakfast? Do you make it yourself? Do you get it from a supermarket? Now think about in rural communities or communities that do not have access to that. So where would they be getting their food for breakfast from? Some of them will be getting it from a gas station. Some of them will be drinking soft drink because they don't have access to water. So you have to think about the difference that we play and the difference that we see through food security and insecurity of what it looks like in community too as well. But that is not even just in community, but when you talk about how we're thinking about food security now in urban areas, because you've got over about 60% of people at the moment is worried about if they can buy fresh food anymore. So what options do they have when they go to a supermarket? How do you feed your family? How do you pay for one capsicum when you can feed your family from one capsicum at McDonald's? Mm-hmm. So the price difference is always a big thing too as well, the affordability of what food is. So when you're managing your diet, do you have an option? So when it comes to things like health risks, what is your options to give you and manage those outcomes? And food security always starts from grassroots. When you always start, like I always like to start in that of thinking food actually begins, but because it doesn't begin in supermarkets. It doesn't begin like, it's not in policy, but it's from the ground itself, or the ocean, or the seasons. You have to think about food from a holistic point of view of like how it starts. And how do you start? How you're born into, okay, this is what we can afford. And I remember growing up, and I think Sean will agree, that when we grew up, we could only get black and gold. Does anybody, I don't know, put your hand up if you understand what black and gold is. It's like the cheap brand, right? And don't get me wrong, we still do it. We still do it today because, that's what you can afford. But the affordability of food means that you might not have access to the healthy eating. So you can say, oh yeah, you have to eat healthy, but can you afford it to do so or to feed your family? I mean, how many people as students, put your hand up if you're just eating noodles every day? Yeah. So your nutritional levels is things, but what about eating the noodles and then adding vegetables to it? Put your hand up if you're doing that, those who are thinking. Yeah, okay, that's it. So it's a cultural thing, right, too, as well. So how do we manage and make more of something that is less? And how do we turn things from nothing into something?
Well, I agree. That's such a powerful place to start. So in public health, we often jump straight to outcomes. Disease, nutrition, statistics. But you're right, it's a system. It's all about the system. And I think it's also a system failure over the time.
Yeah, I mean, like when you think about when you were raised, think about how you were raised and how sustainability has always been a part of your life. You were raised that way. So now we're talking about it like it's a big thing. Like it's, oh, wow, sustainability. Everybody's like, sustainability. We grew up with sustainability because once we couldn't afford things. Our community was built on sustainability because we wanted water tanks, and then we started growing things in our yards. And if you remember in urban areas, especially in Victoria itself, there was this whole thing where, when Europeans when they migrated into Australia, they wanted to have water tanks and they wanted to grow things in their gardens, and everybody was like, no. And now I live with 2 olive trees, So, it's this whole mindset that we have, and you got to think about it on how we think sustainability is. It's not a new word. It's not something new that we haven't been doing. We have been doing it. We're just reinventing of what it looks like now to be sustainable.
But if we zoom out a little, food insecurity is one of the major drivers of chronic disease in Australia, but especially in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. We're seeing such high rates of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease. This population only makes up 3% of the Australian population, but the burden of illness and the impact it has on the Australian healthcare system is astronomical. Dialysis. The cost of dialysis per patient is over $150,000 per patient, and you see how many patients are on dialysis, especially in the Northern Territory, all from secondary complications of diabetes. Food security is such an important part.
Yes, because when you think about your access to food, say you live here, but then you move to a suburb, and I'm talking like Victorian suburb. I'm putting it in context of you living in a suburb. What is your nearest place that you're going to get your food from? Now think about that's the only place that you can get your food from, though. You do not have transport. You do not have the ability to get somewhere. This is the only place that you're going to. And when you think of community and sustainability in communities, when I grew up, was always existed. We always planted something, we always ate from what came from the ground, and we barely bought what came from the shop. Because 1, we didn't have the money to do it, and 2, we were able to do it because that was our life. That's how we were taught. But then to think about it in more vast into bigger communities where they were told, you will not eat this, but this is what you will eat from now on. And then think about the health risk that comes behind that. The issues between us eating what we grew up with and what is off the land, or having a diet that is a bit more. I always think about this, and when people think about seasonality of food, in Australia, we work on a European table. We do not work on an Australian table. Everybody goes, oh yeah, it's cauliflower season. Cauliflower don't belong here, you know? It's like this whole thing, we're like so used to the seasons, but really it's a European table that we're used to. And I give you this challenge as well to think about that seasonal produce, right? Of your diet yourself. We get used to eating the same things day in, day out, which gives us complications. Why do we not eat more vastly?
Well, exactly. But we talk about choice and health. But choice assumes equal opportunity. So in remote communities, healthy food can cost significantly, more than metropolitan areas. So the transport costs, supply chains, it all adds up. Like if you think about it, across Australia, how much do we pay for all of this in food?
You think about yourself, getting yourself to a venue to get, like say you live in a suburb, but there's no transport except for a bus. So then you have to jump on that bus to go to a market to then come back and do that. That's what you think rural communities, they have to have petrol for a car to then go get the stuff. My dad used to, when I grew up, he used to always tell me $20 was 20 litres of petrols. And that was before I was in double figures. So I was about probably 8 or 9, and he always used to say that, which means fuel was already $1 for us in the Torres Strait at my age. And now everybody's like, oh, $2, is like a lot. So you think about the prices that they have to pay just to get access to food. And that was so that we could have a generator that could run the lights for the house. And if we didn't have money for the petrol, then we had kerosene lamps. And then that was also for your outboard so that you would have fuel to go fishing, or you would just fish off the beach. But I never grew up thinking I never grew up hungry because I had access to food, because I live on a tropical island growing up. But now when you live on mainland, those tropical islands are now the food security is getting less because the sea is rising. The water is now affecting the crops because they're over floods and you can't grow anything anymore. So now where are they going to access their food from? So food has to then be brought in. How do we then sustain ourselves for the future? How do we learn new practices for regenerative farming so that we can do different practices? And this is of us going forward and evolving as we do in communities and health. But for me, I always wonder why communities always rely on processed food. And the answer to that is really simple. It's affordability. Now, if you can't buy slices of ham from a deli, but you can buy a log of Devon ham, then you'll buy the log, right, to feed your family. But that's the processed stuff. So you have to think about what kind of money you have in your pocket to be able to feed your family. And you're not thinking about health benefits to them, you're just thinking about feeding them.
The disparity is quite stark. In metropolitan areas, we might complain about the grocery price, but in remote communities, the cost is through the roof. It's extreme. When we're talking about, and like Devon, it would be, $15 or $16, whereas in Woolworths here, you could buy it for less price.
I remember growing up with my first ever taste of beef came out of a can. And that's corned beef in a can, bully beef. We all call it bully beef in the family. And it's still a staple. And I've turned that dish from my dad making it 5 different ways for me when we moved to an island where you couldn't get much produce, to making it 5 different ways. And it was always the same. And now I've taken that same can and turned it into something healthier because we know that it's not healthy, but we eat it anyway. But when you put that price, you buy it here, no one wants it, right? No one wants it. No one wants mutton in a can. But no one wants to buy it here, but you go to community and they want to buy it. So then the price for that will sit for a can that used to be like $2. I remember back when I was a kid, I think it was only $2. It's about $3 now, I think, in the supermarkets here. But you go to community and it's $22. Just for that same small can. Like, what is the petrol prices there to get that there? It's almost like maybe we should have a factory out there. It's easier access for us then because we're the ones buying it. So that is like a big dramatic, that's more than 200% that a community member has to pay for it, but they'll buy it because they know how to feed their family with that one can. But how do we then teach them to feed their families with that one can, but make it a healthier choice too, to add things? We had the same conversation, I think, just earlier about our traditional foods. Our traditional foods have gotten sort of lost along the way of how we eat them or how we produce them too as well. So we have to bring it back, I think. And that time where you can just pick up things, it's so changed now that communities are getting lazier. I have a friend that I call an assembler. So she buys a bottle of tomato sauce, the pasta, and then mince, and she puts it in a pot, and then it just boils away. And you think, oh, that's not good. And then you try and explain that this, but she knows herself as an assembler. But when you think about communities, think about how they were told, okay, this is what you're supposed to eat. Here's a bottle of sauce. Here's your meat product. Here's your rice. That's what you're doing. You're putting that into a can, you're taking it out, and then you're having it with rice. So how do you get people out of that upbringing of thinking that's what you can afford, right? That's what you can afford. This is what you're told to eat. This is what you know how to eat. Don't get me wrong. I try every canned good that's out there because I want to change the way that we think about canned goods, and because communities in rural areas need it too because they can't get fresh produce.
And I think we were talking about this too earlier, Nornie. We was talking about how the food culture has evolved over the years, and looking at people are still this is one of the biggest reasons why in the Torres Strait diabetes is affected, and it's the abdominal obesity. People are still eating a lot of the cultural food, but not burning it in a way because exercise doesn't play a part. It's now taken over by cars, outboard motors and other...
a car, when you can walk around the island
in 15
minutes.
On the mainland it's the same. We rely on our cars rather than walking. The cost of petrol, and everybody went up and down. Well, it's a good opportunity to start walking and start using public transport, but no,
get a bike.
Or a bike, like other countries do. But in the Torres Strait at the time, we did a large community screen, and we looked at the diet within this population, and a lot of people weren't eating fresh food, or especially fruit and vegetables, but they had high folate levels, which is mostly found in fruits. But what we found was the sardines that a lot of people were eating. So the sardines was giving a lot of this population folate, which made them a bit more healthier than what we would expected.
Now everybody don't rush out and start buying sardines, yeah.
But it's
don't eat vegetables. Keep eating the vegetables.
But it was just an interesting study that we found why people's folate levels were high, where fresh fruit and vegetables were not highly available. So the cooking, we were talking about even,
cooking,
using, if you're having rice, use basmati rice, or if you...
the difference. It's about teaching yourself, or how do you teach yourself to get out of traditions that you were kind of told, and I'm not talking just about cultural tradition, but traditions about money too, because... this is a big thing. I always find my friends go, I can't buy that from the supermarket, yet they bought 15 pints at the pub, the day before. And then they won't go and buy something that is good for them at the supermarket. So just have one less pint is what I'm thinking. It will change your way that you will look at things. So when you think about that, and when you really think about and we were talking about how our food has changed of how we cook it, but we're not doing the activities that we did before. And I remember waking up every day as a kid and going, my aunts would be like, go and grab some yams. You go dig up some yams, you come back. So that's your physical activity that you're doing, right? Is you're going and doing that. And now I go up to the Torres Strait and I hear the aunties talk about the kids now going, I don't want that banana from the shop. I want the one from I don't want that banana from the tree. I want the one from the shop. And they're like, you will go and get the one off the tree, But it's that mindset of kids and how we grow them. So for us to think about what regenerative farming is going to look like and circular economy within the communities, how do we do that? And it has to start from grassroots, right? From what you're putting on your plate. And it's not about supermarkets. It's about how do we start them from fresh now? Because we keep talking about how do we get fresh produce? How do we healthier eat? But it has to come from how is it that you're managing your money of feeding your family? And a lot about that is the important thing that you want to talk about when it starts to talk about food security. It's not about how much, how we can access it all the time. It's how we can manage it. How can we manage what we have now? And I really want to see, I've driven a lot around Australia in the last probably 3 years. And I visit many communities, and sometimes I just stop and I see what happens in the morning. And you see kids' access to food they don't have real access because maybe they don't have electricity at home. Maybe they don't have an access to a fridge. So where is all their food coming from? We can say, oh, you should eat healthier, but are you asking them what they have at home to give them healthier food? It's more holistic than just the food itself.
So, Nornie, that would lead into the project that we're working on. So Nornie and I are proposing a project with the University of Melbourne and Nornie as a celebrity chef, looking at strengthening food security with chronic disease in a population group. And we're looking at enhancing local food production and supply chains, improve affordability and accessibility, promote nutrition and healthy lifestyles, and strengthen policy and advocacy. And that's what. But through your work and your advocacy through the Geelong
Farm My School, Farm My School is a great project. It's in the Geelong region, and we did one in Bellarine, and now we've just done one in Colac as well. I don't know if anybody knows who Farm My School is in the audience, but they're a great project. So they take used secondary college land that is not being used, and they turn it into a regenerative farm. And what comes of the outcomes comes from there is that we build young farmers for the future. And that's not just about building food, but that's in all food tech all the way up, of where they're going to go with their future of young farmers who are going to lead the way for us for the next generation. And I think that's great projects to do. If you think about how do we get fresh produce into community, why can't we grow it? Why can't we produce it? Why can't we look at what practices are for farming now and be able to do that in remote communities as well? Because things grow out there. People just think that it's desert and sand. It isn't. There's more to it than that. And when I talked about earlier about that whole idea of thinking about that Australia works on a European table, now think about it a little bit more of our table of how we grow up. Our table is about wind season, rain season, cyclone season, wet, dry. What is our food process in that food cycle itself? So how do we get our minds out of a European table, but designing for the first time our own Australian table of food and enjoying the food that comes from each of the parts of our states that can produce what we need? We live in a country that has 24 million people, and China is about just a little bit bigger than us. They feed 24 million in one city. And they make sure that everybody has access to food. we live in a country that has 24 million in Australia, but we have a lot of places that don't have access to food. So how do we look at it for teaching the next generation of thinking about how do we practice food knowledge? And I always think about this too as well. Just one more thing before we get to questions is that when you think about the food culture in Australia, especially in communities, and we were known as nomads, we didn't have a home. This is what they told us. But now think about it from a food perspective. Think about that we moved with the food so that we could come back and eat it after it regenerated itself, and we could come back again and feed ourselves for years to come. And those sustainable practices have always been here. So how do we then look at about it? I always think, how do I hunt and gather in a city? And, mine is now taking a trolley to the market, or still going down and fishing, like I still can catch some fish too as well.
I mean, they're very good points, and I like the idea of taking the trolley.
Yeah, taking the trolley.
And I think it's a good segue now into questions, because I think our time is up, and there's a lot of work that we need to do from a public health point of view, especially around in food security, and in Nornie's line of work, especially within being a chef and promoting good
practices for us to think about. I hope that when you take away from what we're saying here, that actually just you have to think about that mindset about food, health, and culture all come in one. And it's not just about whether or not you come from a community or a cultural community, but food is a community, and we all learn through food, right? And when you think about that, that's the way forward for us. Is how do we collectively work together as a food culture to make it better so that it's more accessible anywhere in the world that you go to.
Thank you so much, Nornie. That's been a great conversation, and I'm sure has raised many questions in all of your mind. We have a roving microphone, so please put up your hand if you have a question. Please keep to one question and keep it brief, because we'd like to make as much room for people as possible. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for the talk. It was extremely fascinating. I have a question written down. Give me a second. Sorry. I'll try to keep this brief. We spoke a lot about sustainability, and I want to know what your thoughts on the contentious way sustainability seems to be used and framed in public health, especially in the food sector. For example, we talked a lot about sustainability from the perspective of full utilization of local resources. We also talked about it in ensuring that the community continues and thrives. Sorry, I'm trying to phrase this. But it seems like within public health, there's a lot of improper use of the WHO's SDGs, where corporations are greenwashing it, using, especially corporations in the food industries, greenwashing it and using it to putting a spin on it in such a way that sustainability becomes, how do we maintain our profit margins? So how do you think where do you think about the contentious ways that it's framed between communities on the ground and these corporations, and how do we address and improve that sort of relationship?
Oh, it's a good question, and I think it goes back to one of the things that I think would work really well, especially across many parts of Australia, is the Farm My School approach. Is getting kids at an early age to start to grow, and getting communities to start growing vegetables in their own communities. Nornie, because she's on the board of Farm My School.
I think when you think about how do you take it out of corporations, it's not about taking it out corporations, but it's education corporations.
And you're also on the board of Coles, so how do we take it out of Coles?
Yes, thanks for that. No, we are trying to make really big changes, So I work for projects like, Fair Share and Second Bite as well, and we look for mob foods, in communities and following that through communities as well. And don't think this is one thing. It's a whole bunch of things. But when I talk about grassroots, I think that we keep talking about how do we do healthy food, right? We just keep going, oh yeah, you've got to put vegetables in things and you've got to exercise. But why can't we stop thinking about that and thinking about where it starts instead? So then corporations, everybody will all have a piece of the pie, but it's about sustaining communities so that they do not have the problem of it coming into where do we cut the cost? We don't want to be paying for the cost for the food to come in. We want to grow the food at grassroots. So why can't we change that? We change the way that we access it. So it's sort of looking at it in a bit more of a simple, complex term, but it's better to think about it from simplicity than trying to fight everybody else. I'm one of those things that hate red tape, I'm like, no, thank you, I'll just go around you, and I think that way a lot all the time. But when we think about food security, we have to start it from grassroots in community itself for it to be run sustainably by community for community, and then the corporations and everybody else can just catch up with us.
I work for a charity that comes under the Second Bite umbrella, so I have seen, truckloads coming in from Costco, and if you ever see bread available, take the bread. There is so much bread waste. But my father used to set up irrigation systems on farms in New South Wales, and one day he was levelling a paddock and he noticed all these red rocks, and what they was beetroot. And the canning factory, the crop was a little bit late. The canning factory in Cowra no longer was doing beetroot, they were doing asparagus. And so the beetroot got ploughed back into the ground. And I said, why didn't the farmer take it to a farmer's market? And Dad said, that's 30 tonnes of beetroot. You cannot take it to a farmer's market. So these are the systems, this is not a question, this is just an observation, these are the systems that let us down. There's plenty of food in Australia. It's just not getting where it needs to go, and a lot of it, seriously, just gets ploughed back into the ground.
I agree. So, there is a statistics about blueberries at this present moment, right? So we used to only have blueberries once a year. It would all come through and we would have it. Now we have it all year round available to us. So guess what's the biggest wastage of fruit right now? Blueberries. Because we want it all year round and we got it all year round, but now we don't eat it all year round. So you have to think about the biggest wasters of food is us. We are the problem. At the end of the day, we waste food more than supermarkets, than anything else. It's actually we're the biggest wasters of food. We want what we want all year round, but why not just go back to actually enjoying it once a year and not having to have it every day?
To both of you, thank you, and I acknowledge both of you as brothers and sisters. My question and comment is about the Victorian context of your study, or what that will look at. And for us as First Nations people here in Victoria, as traditional owners, mob that were here before 1788 with our apical ancestors, whilst I didn't grow up on a mission or a reserve, I grew up in a situation where I have vivid recollections of eating river turtle. Now, for some people, that's probably a very gross thought.
Sorry, my first thought was yum.
But the question in that is, from an environmental perspective and from a biodiversity perspective, our river water, our riverways are managed like a sewer, and they're used for irrigation purposes and to make money, and it's back to front.
Correct.
And so our species of turtles have been under duress and die, and not a lot of our mob participate in that sort of cultural food stuff. When I grew up, I remember vividly eating possum.
I just had some last week.
Now, you can't go to Coles or Woolies and buy possum.
Not yet.
Well...
Did you hear I'm on the board now?
and I like it, sister. I like it. I can't go and buy emu. Well, I can.
I'll give
But
you
it-
some supplies.
Well, there's a place here in Victoria
Yeah.
that produces quite a lot.
Yeah.
Kangaroo's the same, ethically farmed kangaroo. I don't know what's ethically farmed about it. You know, they get shot from wherever they get shot. But our mob, when we hunted and ate kangaroo, we did it for the purpose of using it as a product as well as acknowledging it culturally and all those sorts of things.
Correct.
So we have a whole younger generation here in Victoria of young people, our mob, and diabetes is part of the issue we've got amongst a whole range of other things. So there's some legislative constraints, there are some policing and policy issues around that, there are some issues around access to tenable land, whether as TO mob or as groups of people. And we've got a lethargic lot of mob that are growing up with these things that you hold in your hand, or you jump on the TV and you watch renowned chefs making stuff and you go, oh, I like that.
me.
Master chef here.
I go down to Coles and Woolies and I'll buy it. So there's a dilemma in this around the sustainability stuff. And I suppose in terms of a question is, from a Victorian perspective, how are you going to involve us mob, First Nation mob, in this research stuff that you're doing?
Well, this research is for mob. So, I mean, like the best thing about Victoria, I find, is that we have the best access to First Nations food more than anywhere else in Australia. And I can vouch for that, because I've been working here a very long time on building that process for us to access First Nations foods. And the thing is that at the moment right now, I don't know if you guys know this, but down in Gordon in Geelong too as well, the Gordon Institute down there, they've just started a food program for mob, and it's designed by mob and shared in the cultural ways of cooking food and producing it and going out and catching it and cooking it in the Wathaurong people's, way of the systems that they had down there. I think slow processes like that, and these are just the beginnings. And when you see that happening here, that's a great move forward to where we're going to be changing away the things. I think that Australian food is going to be looked at through an indigenous lens for the future. I think if you talk about modern Australian food, it is going to be led by us, of what modern Australian food will look like for the future as well. And I think it will look through an indigenous lens. And I'm very, very pleased and lucky to live in Victoria where we have a lot of access to it. I think we're starting things here. Things will grow from here. But, when you grow up in a tradition like mine as well, where we did grow up eating turtle, we did grow up eating dugong, and that's still a part of our life, it can come back. I think we're in many places around the world, they're bringing back natural cultures that exist. And I hope that one day maybe we will have the river turtle back here too as well. It may look differently of how we do it, but that's what we need young farmers for the future.
And to answer that, one of the things, especially from a research perspective, is co-design. We have to co-design with mob. Work with mob, understand what is cultural protocol. We have to understand the data. We have to understand what has worked, what's not worked, all of that. But to your point about how do we engage, it'll be a co-design process because that's imperative from a research perspective.
And I want to sit down with as much communities as I can, because there's one thing I do love learning is about food.
We're lucky enough to be secondary school teachers, so have an impact straight on the road with students. Our school is very involved with being volunteers at different charities and things like that. What can we do to impact people straight away? We're lucky enough to run a program where we're teaching the students all the skills about learning to cook from scratch, all that sort of stuff. Our students do go up to Kakadu as part of the school program, so they get to experience some of the indigenous culture. We would like to input more into that and talk to them more about food security, but what things can we get them to do now, like volunteering and stuff. They have to do 20 hours of community service and things like that.
I think you have
But we
to
don't know where.
engage with the local communities too as well, of the areas that you're looking at. Engage with those community groups, because they have their own learnings and teachings too as well. So it depends on each group that you go to. We have a vast country that has many different community groups, and we should embrace them. You know, if you're in an area, get in touch with your local community members that are there and really work with them too as well, because they already have things in place as well that they're doing.
And from a public health perspective, it's the best place is to start off with the schools. But then the burden of school teachers on trying to do all the public health initiatives, you know, brushing the teeth and then food, because if you start off with the kids, they help influence the parents to, you know, say, oh, mum and dad, can you cook this? You shouldn't be cooking it like that way, or, you know, they...
But
so
I also
it
think
is
that you have to engage with the parents too as well, because you think that, like, there was a study that was done by Fair Share and Second Bite too as well in community mob food. So they started in a community, they gave out boxes of food to send home to the families, because they found out that the parents at home are only, they're going without food because they're feeding their children. So how do we engage with the kids to come to school? We're engaging with them to give them free food and fresh food to come to school. But how do we then engage with their parents? So then they sent boxes of food home for their parents with each kid. So there's no culture behind it of, especially that shame culture, of like not like being ashamed that you don't have any money, that you don't have any things. These things are all traditional things that you have to look at, that sometimes we don't see it as a lens, but we do. We understand it. So when you're engaging, you have to remember that yes, you can get through to the kids to like things and get them to school to learn more and understand, but you have to physically engage with parents too as well, because you just don't know what they have at home.
With the urbanisation of most countries and the kind of all opportunities are more in urban centres, so people will gravitate towards these highly populated areas. How do we do this holistic kind of understanding of food and everything when you're in a more concentrated area without space? So many people live in apartments, and in New Zealand, most good farmland is now housing, and so a lot of people like Māori and Pacific Islanders and a lot of people, they don't have access to fresh food and they live in food deserts. And how do we kind of work with the communities to increase that access?
I think it also starts with like what you know too as well. And we were having this conversation out the back about like, you know, the idea of what you put in your basket, right? So when a shopper goes to the shop, they're like looking about what they put in their basket and then what they're going to make from that. When you go to a store, you're going, oh, I'm going to make lasagna tonight. So then you get all your ingredients for lasagna. Now think about what you can access, what you can get, and then teaching how do we make that better.
Like a healthier option.
Like a healthier option. Yes, they might not have access to it, but what they have, how can we turn that too as well into a better option? Because there are ways of doing it. It's just that sometimes we're stuck in a rut of teaching ourselves this is all we know how to do. And that's why I said give you the challenge, right? We, as a person, every week you will buy an eggplant every week if you're an eggplant lover. You do not go outside of that. You will still put eggplant and go, oh, I want eggplant this week. It's like goldfish memory when it comes to a supermarket. Oh, eggplant again. Oh, I'll have some eggplant again. So how do we think about that but change the way that we think about how we're going to present it and how we're going to look at it?
I was telling Jodie in Brisbane last week that, I mean, I eat quite healthy at times, but I crave Vegemite. Like I do crave Vegemite, and I can just eat Vegemite on toast over anything.
It's just how many pieces of toast you eat.
But how many toast? Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
2. But you know what I mean? Like, no butter. Just Vegemite. No.
And everything is in moderation, right? But you think about communities, when they eat big meals because they might not know when they're going to eat again too as well. So they will eat so much, and that's not a healthy way of thinking about it too as well. So you got to think about, like, it's more of a holistic approach than actually just what you can access. So I hope that from what we're going to build in our program is not just about access to food, but how do we also give them what they have now and turn that into a better option.
One last question.
Hi, I'm not an Indigenous person, but I have just spent 6 weeks travelling in China. I used to live there also. And it's always been one of the things that I love about China is you eat the local grass everywhere you go. And it amazes me, you talked about the European table, that, we kind of have 20 vegetables and that's
it.
That's it. So even as a non-Indigenous person, I would like to see more of this local food, rediscovering the foods that are local and getting it more broadly than into the Indigenous community, but to everyone, the sustainability for all of us to be eating more local stuff.
I think it's a good point. And like I said, with the challenge that you have is, I give you a challenge, right? Just this week, next week, let's start next week because you probably already bought your shopping. But let's think of you for next week. Think about affordability and then think about the change that you could make. Try something different that you just walk past and go, oh, I always think about that, but take it home and cook it. So try something different. Try and get out of your rut of what you eat every single week and try something different altogether. And I understand the love of being in China and eating every single thing that was there, because I just came back from there as well with seeing their food practices and what they do there too as well. I mean, they can feed, like I said, food is something that they all access. That's one thing they really do know how to do. But I really do believe that, like you said, we eat 20 vegetables. Well, we eat less than 10% of every vegetable that is out there in the world, because you eat the same thing day in, day out. Give yourself the opportunity to try something new every day.
Because there is the seasonal calendar, and we were talking about this the other day. Most communities have a seasonal calendar, and based on the fruits and what seasons. But due to climate change now, that's changing, significantly. So a lot of the seasonal calendar has to be modified. But I do take on your point around using that seasonal calendar to look at
each island or each community has a seasonal calendar that exists. Most communities have that. They will tell you, and it'll have dry season or this season. This is what will be in the local area that you can have. And it's the same here in Victoria as well. When we talk about mob and food, so many people don't realise on how much native ingredients actually, native foods grow here in Victoria, even though we're a cold part. We have the best access to things like, pepper berries, quandongs, warrigal greens, all of this. And it is all a part that you can, it is accessible here. So there is so much that you can do in community and change the way that we eat, but it is us. We need to be leading the way of what is, the new future of food is going to look like too as well. But yeah.
And that's at Woolworths, isn't it?
Stop it. Don't even say that. I don't know him. If you're a Coles representative, this is not an omission of anything. And it's not in my contract to be able to say that.
Very sadly, that's all we have time for this evening. I think we're all going to go and shop for something different next week and cook something new, because I think I definitely need something new on rotation. But thank you so much, Sean and Nornie, for your amazing conversation and engagement with the audience. Thank you all so much for your interest and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the podcast series of Raising the Bar Melbourne, a special health edition. If you want to listen to more Raising the Bar talks, head to rtbevent.com/podcasts.